The smell of burnt coffee clung to her uniform again. It was a kind of stale, overuse and that no amount of washing could erase, like the residue of exhaustion. Emily Parker balanced a tray of paper cups, her wrists aching under the weight, her steps quick but silent through the marble-floored lobby of Sterling Enterprises. Her manager's voice, sharp, nasal, permanently impatient, echoed behind her. "Parker, you're late again. One more delay, and HR will hear about it." Emily didn't turn. She just nodded, biting the inside of her cheek. The clock hadn't even struck 8 yet, but she'd already been awake since 4, getting her 7-year-old daughter, Lily, ready for school. The bus stop was 3 blocks away, and her hands still trembled from the cold November wind. By the time she reached the 32nd floor, she was sweating under the cheap polyester of her work shirt. She placed the coffee tray on the long, glass conference table and whispered, "Sorry, Mr. Haynes," as the senior executives began to file in, the men in their press suits barely glancing her way. Mr. Haynes, a middle-aged man with graying temples and an ego that filled the room, didn't bother to hide his disdain. "You should consider punctuality part of your job description, Ms. Parker." "Yes, sir," she murmured, her voice small. "Don't just stand there. Wipe down the table. We're expecting the board in 5. She obeyed, her movements automatic. Across the table, a man sat quietly near the window. He didn't belong to the usual pack of corporate wolves. His suit was dark but not flashy, his face partially shadowed by the morning light. He seemed to be taking everything in silently, almost studying the people instead of the presentation slides. When Emily accidentally brushed the edge of his sleeve while reaching for a napkin, he looked up. Their eyes met for a brief, suspended moment. His were a gray-green she'd never seen before, clear, steady, unsettlingly perceptive. "Sorry," she said quickly, drawing back. "It's fine," he replied, his tone gentle but deliberate, the kind of voice that could either comfort or command, depending on how it was used. She didn't know why that voice lingered in her mind even as she hurried back to the break room, where her co-worker and only real friend, Marcy, was waiting. Marcy smirked. "He noticed you." Emily frowned. "Who?" "The guy in the corner. Didn't you see the way he looked at you? You don't get that kind of attention in this building unless you're on the board or in trouble." Emily laughed weakly. "I'd prefer neither." Marcy chuckled, blowing on her tea. "Girl, you need something to shake your life up. You've been running on fumes since your ex left." The mention of him, the name she avoided even in her own thoughts, sent a flicker of pain through her. Jason had promised stability, a home, a future for her and Lily. But that illusion had shattered 2 years ago, when she discovered the late nights weren't extra shift, but rendezvous with a younger woman. He'd left without remorse, without even saying goodbye to their daughter. The memory still clawed at her sometimes, unbidden and bitter. So, no, she didn't need attention. Not from a stranger, not from anyone. By noon, she'd forgotten about the man in the corner, or tried to, until she saw him again. He was in the cafeteria, sitting alone at a small table, a simple sandwich untouched before him. He wasn't eating, just watching people. Emily passed him twice, clearing trays and wiping tables. The third time, he spoke. "You seem in a hurry," he said. She froze mid-step. Yeah, always, He smiled faintly. "You work in catering." "Facilities," she corrected. "But yeah, close enough." "Not an easy job." "No job is easy when rent's due," she said before she could stop herself. He didn't laugh or pity her. He just nodded, as if he understood something deeper than her words. Before she could say anything else, Mr. Haynes appeared, red-faced and irritated. "Parker, stop chatting and do your work." Her cheeks flushed. "Yes, sir." The man's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer before he stood and left without a word. That night, the rain was relentless. Sheets of water lashed the bus windows as Emily stared out, her reflection a blur in the glass. Lily was asleep against her arm, her small head resting on Emily's shoulder. When they reached their stop, Emily carried her daughter through the rain, umbrella flipping inside out in the wind. By the time she got inside their small apartment, she was soaked through. She changed into dry clothes, tucked Lily into bed, and sat quietly at the table. "Bills." Past due notices. The number on her phone glared at her, a voicemail from the landlord she hadn't dared to listen to. Her stomach growled. She ignored it. Instead, she thought about the stranger again. There was something about him that didn't fit. The way he observed everything. The calmness. The quiet authority. He didn't seem like an employee or even a visitor. But that was ridiculous. Billionaires didn't sit in cafeterias or talk to janitorial staff. Still, she couldn't shake it off. 2 days later, everything began to unravel. It was supposed to be a routine day. She'd been assigned to deliver a document envelope to the conference floor. But as she stepped out of the elevator, she noticed chaos. Security guards rushing, executives whispering. Something had happened. Then she saw him again. The stranger, now standing in the middle of the commotion, his expression sharp, commanding. People were addressing him with a tone she'd never heard before. Respectful, nervous. And then it hit her. He wasn't just anyone. He was Daniel Sterling. The Daniel Sterling, founder and CEO of Sterling Enterprises. Billionaire, media ghost who rarely appeared in public. Emily froze mid-step, heart hammering. He caught her staring. Recognition flickered across his face. Then he gave her the slightest nod, acknowledgement, maybe even gratitude. But before she could understand what it meant, her manager stormed toward her. "Parker, my office. Now." Her stomach dropped. Inside, Mr. Haynes slammed the door. "You've been reported." "Reported? For what?" "For insubordination. Talking to executive guests. Loitering on duty. We have policies, Ms. Parker." Her pulse spiked. "I didn't do anything wrong." "Enough. HR has decided to terminate your employment effective immediately." "What?" "You'll receive your final paycheck within the week. Please leave the building." Her vision blurred. The sound in the room distorted, replaced by a low, pounding echo in her ears. "Please," she whispered. "I need this job. My daughter." But he'd already turned away. Outside the office, Daniel Sterling stood near the elevators. He was speaking to someone, but when he saw her, his words faltered. Emily's tears were already falling as she passed him. She didn't look back. She didn't see the flash of guilt in his eyes. The elevator doors slid shut between them. Emily caught one last glimpse of his face, those steady gray-green eyes darkened by something that almost looked like remorse, before steel swallowed him whole. By the time she reached the street, the rain had started again, thin at first, then sudden and heavy, as if the sky itself couldn't hold back. She walked fast, the city's hum dissolving into white noise around her. No umbrella, no job, just a pink slip and a hollow ache in her chest. She made it halfway down Fifth before her legs gave out. She ducked into a narrow alley behind a bakery, leaned against the wet brick, and finally let herself cry. Her phone buzzed, an email notification from HR. Subject, termination confirmation. She didn't open it. Instead, she slid down to the curb, hugging her knees to her chest. She thought of Lily's backpack, the one with the missing zipper and hand-sewn patch she'd fixed last night. She thought of milk running low, the rent due Friday, the stack of bills on the table. It felt like the air had been punched out of her. When her breathing steadied enough, she forced herself up and began to walk. The bus home was late, the seats half filled with strangers who looked as tired as she felt. A toddler cried 3 rows back. Someone coughed into a scarf. The city outside was a smear of lights and rain. Emily stared out the window, thinking, why? Why today? Why her? She'd given everything to that job. She'd skipped lunches, covered shifts, cleaned up after executives who never learned her name. And now, for what? Because she'd spoken to a stranger? Her throat tightened. No, not a stranger. Daniel Sterling. She replayed every moment. The cafeteria, the brief conversation, the quiet way he'd looked at her. Nothing about it felt wrong. Nothing had crossed a line. Unless someone had seen. Someone who didn't like that she'd been noticed. By the time she reached her stop, anger had begun to flicker beneath the grief. Not a wild, burning kind, a slow, simmering heat. She carried Lily up the apartment stairs that night with a mechanical calm. Dinner was boxed macaroni and apple slices. She smiled through the motions, helped with homework, read a bedtime story, kissed her daughter's forehead. It wasn't until Lily was asleep that she finally allowed herself to fall apart again. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the termination email, rereading the words until they blurred. Then her phone buzzed again, an unknown number. She hesitated, answered. "Ms. Parker." The voice was deep, composed, familiar. Her pulse stuttered. "Yes." "This is Daniel Sterling." For a heartbeat she couldn't speak. "Mr. Sterling?" "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I was told you were let go today. I didn't realize it was connected to me." Her jaw clenched. "Connected to you?" "There was a misunderstanding. I was visiting departments anonymously. Your manager thought you were out of line speaking to me. He acted without consulting HR." She almost laughed, a bitter, disbelieving sound. "That's convenient." "I assure you, it wasn't my intention," he said. "I wanted to see the company from the ground up, understand how people are treated." She swallowed the sharpness in her throat. "And now you know." Silence hung between them. Rain pattered faintly through the receiver. "Emily," he said finally, using her name as though he'd weighed it carefully before speaking it. "Please come to my office tomorrow morning. I'd like to fix this." "I don't think I have an office to go to anymore," she murmured. "You will," he said simply. 9 a.m. The call ended. Emily stared at her phone. Part of her wanted to believe him, the sincerity in his tone, the certainty. But another part of her whispered that this was too strange, too sudden. People like Daniel Sterling didn't call women like her. She barely slept. Morning came gray and cold. Lily's small hand waved from the school bus window, and for the first time in days, Emily felt a flicker of hope, or maybe just curiosity. She dressed in her neatest outfit, the one she'd once saved for interviews. Black slacks, a white blouse, a warm but polished pair of flats. When she entered the Sterling Enterprises tower again, the security guard paused, uncertain whether to stop her. But Daniel himself appeared from an elevator across the lobby, phone in hand, and nodded. "She's with me." Those 3 words froze the entire reception desk. The ride up to the 50th floor was silent except for the soft hum of the elevator. She felt his presence beside her, composed and unreadable. When the doors opened, he gestured toward an expansive office framed by glass. The city stretched below like a map of light. "Please, sit," he said. She remained standing. "Mr. Sterling, I appreciate the call, but I really can't afford to waste time if this isn't about reinstatement." He smiled faintly. "Direct. Good." He set his phone aside. "You were fired unfairly. I've already reversed the decision. But I'd like to offer you something else, a position with my executive office. Temporary, for now." Her heart skipped. "Executive? Sir, I'm not." "It's not an executive role. More of a liaison. Someone who tells me what people like you experience in this company, without filters." "Why me?" she asked softly. "Because you spoke honestly," he said. "Most people don't." She didn't know what to say. Gratitude tangled with suspicion. He studied her a moment, then leaned forward. "I can see you're cautious. That's good. But you'll be compensated fairly, and you'll set your own hours. You have a daughter, don't you?" The question caught her off guard. "How do you?" "I read your file." Her breath hitched. Something about his tone felt too personal, like he'd read more than her employment history. She nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." "Take your time," he said, though his eyes said otherwise, that he expected she'd accept. When she left, she found herself walking more slowly than usual, her mind a swirl of conflicting feelings. It sounded too good. It felt too good. But still, a job. Stability. Maybe even redemption. That evening, Marcy showed up at her apartment with a grocery bag and a conspiratorial grin. "He called you?" "The Daniel Sterling." Emily sighed. "Apparently." "Oh my God. You realize people spend their lives trying to get 5 minutes with that man." "I didn't ask for this." Marcy poured wine into mismatched mugs. Maybe the universe finally decided he deserved a break. Emily smiled, though her chest still felt tight. Or maybe it's a test. A test of what? Trust. Her friend laughed. Then for once, maybe you should try trusting. But later, when the apartment was quiet and Lily slept, Emily couldn't. She sat by the window, the city lights glimmering like distant fires, and whispered to herself, I don't even know who he really is. The next morning, Emily stood at the mirror, unsure what version of herself she was supposed to bring to work. The new role, liaison, Daniel had called it, sounded ambiguous, almost invented. She smoothed her blouse, pulled her hair back into a low bun, and caught Lily watching from the doorway, still in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed bear. Mommy, are you going back to your old job? Sort of, Emily said softly. It's a different one this time. Will you still pick me up after school? Always. She knelt, kissed her forehead, and forced a smile that felt steadier than she felt. Promise. The bus honked outside. Lily waved, and the door shut, and suddenly Emily was alone again, standing in the quiet hum of a small apartment that smelled faintly of coffee and rain, and the soft, lingering scent of Lily's shampoo. She took one last breath before heading out. At Sterling Enterprises, people were watching her now. The whispers started the moment she walked in with a visitor's badge clipped to her chest, escorted by Daniel Sterling himself. Who is she? Someone murmured near the elevators. She's not new HR. She's with him. Emily tried to ignore them. Daniel guided her to a smaller office adjoining his, bright, modern, and almost painfully minimalist. A desk, a chair, and a window overlooking the skyline. Consider this your base, he said. You'll meet with employees, document what you learn, and report directly to me. She blinked. You want me to talk to people? Yes. Ask them how they are treated, what could be improved. Off the record, they'll speak more freely with someone who isn't management. It was oddly specific, and strangely idealistic coming from a man who ruled a billion-dollar empire. He must have read her skepticism, because his tone softened. Emily, I built this company from the ground up. Somewhere along the line, I lost sight of the people who helped make it what it is. I need a truth teller, someone unafraid to make me uncomfortable. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. All right, I'll do my best. Good, he said. Then, quieter, I don't doubt that you will. For the first week, she barely saw him. She moved through departments, notebook in hand, quietly interviewing staff from janitors to accountants. Some were suspicious, others eager to talk. I've been asking for better overtime pay for years, one said. Management doesn't listen, another sighed. They only care when someone's watching. By Friday, Emily had pages of notes and a deeper understanding of how the company really ran. Beneath its polished surface, it pulsed with exhaustion, resentment, and fear. When she finally stepped into Daniel's office to deliver her first report, he was by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, phone pressed to his ear. Yes, I understand, he was saying, voice low but sharp. But that acquisition can't move forward until the audit clears. No, I don't care about the Bard's impatience. He hung up and turned, the tension dissolving almost instantly when he saw her. You look like you've been through a war. Close enough, she said, holding up her notebook. You wanted honesty? You're going to get it. He smiled faintly. That's what I like to hear. She sat across from him and began reading her notes, the complaints, the frustration, the hidden fears of the employees she'd spoken to. To her surprise, Daniel didn't defend or deflect. He just listened. When she finished, there was a pause. Thank you, he said finally. This is exactly what I needed. Emily exhaled slowly. I wasn't sure how much you'd want to hear. All of it, he said, especially the parts that hurt. She studied him for a moment. Beneath the smooth composure and expensive suit, there was something raw in his eyes, a kind of exhaustion that mirrored her own. She wondered if he ever really slept. Days blurred into weeks. Emily grew used to the rhythm, collecting stories, taking notes, sometimes exchanging a rare smile or quiet word with Daniel when their paths crossed. But the more time she spent around him, the more she felt the strangeness of his dual nature. To his board members, he was controlled and distant, every gesture calculated. To her, in those brief private moments, he was human, warm, occasionally disarmingly kind. One evening, long after most employees had gone home, she found him still at his desk, surrounded by open files. The city lights bled gold through the glass behind him. "You should go home," she said. "It's almost 9. He looked up, eyes tired. "You should, too. I don't have a driver waiting downstairs." "Neither do I," he said. She raised a brow. "You mean you actually drive yourself?" He smiled. "Sometimes. It's the only place I can think." Something about that made her chest tighten. She set a report down in front of him, hesitated, then said softly, "You know, people talk about you like you're a ghost." "A ghost?" She nodded. "Untouchable, invisible, the kind of man you only see on magazine covers." "And what do you think?" "I think you're not nearly as untouchable as you want people to believe." His gaze lingered on her a moment too long. "You might regret saying that." "I might," she admitted, "but it's true." Their eyes held, quiet, steady, the air between them charged with something neither of them dared name. Then he looked away. "You should go home, Emily." She nodded. "Good night, Mr. Sterling." "Daniel," he said, almost under his breath. She paused at the door. "Good night, Daniel." That night, as she rode the bus home, she caught herself smiling, small, unguarded. It had been a long time since anyone had made her feel seen, not as a struggling single mother or an employee, but as a person. But that thought frightened her too, because she'd made that mistake once before, trusting someone who looked at her like she mattered. When she reached her apartment, Lily was already asleep. Emily brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead and whispered, "I'm doing this for you, baby." The city hummed outside. Her phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number again. "You did well today." No signature. But she knew who it was. She stared at the screen for a long moment, heart quickening, not with romance, but with something she couldn't yet name. Curiosity. Fear. A sense that something about all this wasn't as simple as it seemed. She typed back, "Thank you, but I'm not sure what you want from me." The reply came almost instantly. "The truth. Always." She set the phone down, staring into the dark. But deep down, she knew truth always came with a price. And she was starting to wonder just how high his might be. By the 3rd month, Emily had stopped feeling like an outsider at Sterling Enterprises. People smiled at her in the halls now. Some came to her desk to talk, to vent, to ask if she could take their concerns to the top. And through it all, Daniel had become a steady presence. He wasn't just her boss anymore. He'd become something far trickier to define. There were mornings when he'd stop by her office just to ask how Lily was doing in school. Afternoons when he'd bring her coffee, claiming he'd accidentally ordered too many. It was small things, harmless on the surface, but they carried a warmth she hadn't felt in years, a dangerous kind of warmth. And then one evening, everything shifted. They'd stayed late again, working through reports for an upcoming audit. Rain streaked down the tall windows, the city lights blurring into a restless shimmer. Daniel had loosened his tie, his jacket draped over a chair. Emily was seated across the desk, flipping through a spreadsheet when she noticed him watching her. "What?" she said without looking up. "You never complain," he said. "Should I?" "Most people do. You don't. Complaining doesn't pay the bills." He smiled faintly, practical as always. She looked up then, and something passed between them. Unspoken, fragile, magnetic. He cleared his throat. "You should go home. Lily will wonder where you are. She's with Massa tonight. Sleep over." He hesitated. "Then stay. Just for a while. It's peaceful, having someone to talk to who doesn't want something from me." Her pulse quickened, and she hated herself for it. "You have an entire board who worships you." "That's not the same." The words hung heavy. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain filled the silence, steady and rhythmic. Then he said, quietly, "Do you ever wonder what you'd do if life gave you another chance? If everything you lost came back in a different form?" She looked at him, the pain flickering in her eyes. "No, because it doesn't." Daniel leaned back, studying her. "You really don't believe in second chances?" Not anymore. He nodded slowly, gaze unreadable. Maybe I can change that. She didn't remember how long they talked after that. About work, about Lily, about the quiet ache of trying to rebuild a life when the pieces never quite fit again. But when she finally gathered her things to leave, Daniel stood and said softly, "Emily." She turned. "I know this job started as an apology, but I meant it when I said I need someone like you here. Someone real." Her throat tightened. "Thank you." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good night." That night, she lay awake long after Lily had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling. Her chest was tight, not from fear, but from something far more dangerous. Hope? She hated that it was there at all, because hope had teeth, and she knew better than to trust anyone with a voice as calm and a gaze as steady as Daniel Sterling's. The following week, she began to notice odd things. An envelope left on her desk with files she didn't recognize, internal memos, confidential report about executive misconduct, a security guard greeting her by name when she'd never met him before, an IT technician quietly upgrading her computer, saying, "Orders from the top," and Daniel, distant one moment, attentive the next, like a man waging a war she wasn't allowed to see. She tried to ignore the unease building in her gut, until one afternoon, while sorting through files for a compliance review, she stumbled upon an email chain, one that wasn't meant for her eyes. Subject, Liaison Program Evaluation. From d.sterling@sterlingenterprises.com to legal@sterlingenterprises.com. Monitor employee Parker's interactions and compile feedback. Assess trustworthiness and potential leverage value. Maintain discretion. Her breath stopped. The edges of the paper cut into her palm as she gripped the printout too tightly. Leverage value? Her stomach churned. She read it again, hoping she'd misunderstood. But there it was, her name, her title, and the cold, calculated language of someone testing loyalty, not trust. Her vision blurred with disbelief. Daniel had been using her. The late-night conversations, the kindness, the chance to make things right. It wasn't redemption, it was research. She slammed the folder shut, heart racing. He'd been watching her all along. That evening, she avoided his calls. 3 times her phone lit up with his name. She let it ring each time, pulse hammering in her ears. By the time she picked up the 4th, her voice was ice. "What do you want?" He hesitated. "You didn't answer earlier. Are you all right?" "I found something." A pause. "What did you find?" "An email," she said, voice trembling. "About me. About being monitored." Silence. Then, carefully, "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter?" "It does," he said. "Because if it's what I think it is, you've misunderstood." "Then explain it." He exhaled. "Not over the phone. Meet me at the penthouse office tomorrow. 8 a.m. "No," she said sharply. "You can explain it now." "I can't. Please, Emily. Trust me." She laughed bitterly. "That's the one thing I don't have left." Then she hung up. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Every thought twisted back to him. His words, his gestures, the way he'd looked at her as if she mattered. And all of it had been a test. By dawn, her anger had cooled into something colder, steadier, resolve. If he wanted to play games, she'd find out why. The next morning, she arrived early, too early. The building was quiet, the sky still bruised with the colors of sunrise. She rode the elevator to the top floor, her reflection a pale ghost in the glass. Daniel was already there. He looked exhausted, standing by the window in shirt sleeves, hands buried in his pockets. "You read the email," he said simply. "Yes," she said. "Was any of it a lie?" He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "No, but it wasn't what you think." "Really?" "Because it sounded a lot like manipulation." "I needed to know who I could trust," he said. "Everyone around me has a motive, money, power, access. I needed someone honest. And you were." Her voice trembled. "You used me." "I tested you," he corrected softly. "And you passed." Her anger cracked. "You don't get to dress betrayal up as admiration." He stepped closer, his voice low, urgent. "Emily, listen to me. What you uncovered, it's not just about you. There are people in this company trying to take it down from the inside. I needed someone real to expose them. You've already helped more than you realize." She shook her head. "You could have told me the truth. I couldn't risk it." Her eyes filled with tears, not from weakness, but from the unbearable weight of disappointment. "You were supposed to be different." He looked at her for a long, silent moment, regret etched deep in his face. "I still am," he said quietly. She didn't believe him. When she left his office, she knew something had changed between them forever. Trust had cracked, and once it cracked, it never truly healed. It just learned to hide the fracture better. But deep down, she knew this wasn't over. Daniel's secrets were bigger than his lies. And now, she was part of them. The morning after the firing felt like waking into a nightmare that refused to end. Lena sat at the kitchen table, staring at a pile of unpaid bills. The paper edges were curled, ink smudged where her trembling hands had held them for too long. Her daughter, Emma, was still asleep in her room, her tiny breaths audible through the thin wall. The sight of her pink backpack slumped by the door was a small, silent accusation. You're supposed to protect her, not fail her. The kettle whistled on the stove, breaking her daze. She poured herself a cup of tea, but the steam only fogged her glasses and made her eyes sting more. Sleep had been impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the security guard's expression, the pitying glance from her manager, the sound of her ID badge clattering to the floor as it was taken from her. And above it all, that stranger's face. The man she'd helped. The man whose eyes had held something she couldn't name. She didn't even know his name. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her friend. "Cassie, I heard about what happened. They are saying you breached policy." "What the hell? Lena? What did you even do?" Lena typed, erased, typed again. How could she explain something that didn't make sense even to her? She'd just been kind. Human. She'd seen a man struggling and helped him. And for that, she'd lost everything. "It's complicated," she finally wrote. "Can we talk later?" Cassie didn't reply. By noon, the silence in the apartment was unbearable. She took out her laptop, scrolled through job listings, but every line of text blurred together. Experience required. Corporate background preferred. Immediate availability. She met none of those perfectly neat requirements. A knock at the door made her jump. It was Mrs. Patel, her elderly neighbor from across the hall, holding a dish of warm lentils. "You look pale. Beat her," she said softly. "Eat something. You can't fight battles on an empty stomach." Lena managed a small, grateful smile. "Thank you. You always know when I need it most." Mrs. Patel gave her a knowing look. "You have a kind heart. The world doesn't always reward that. But don't change." Lena almost broke down right there. Later, when Emma came home from school, Lena pasted on her practice smile. "How was your day, sweetheart?" Emma shrugged. "We had a spelling test. I think I did okay." "Of course you did," Lena said, ruffling her daughter's hair. "You always do." Emma hesitated. "Mom, are you sad?" The question sliced through her. "No, honey, just tired." That night, after Emma was asleep, Lena sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, people were laughing in restaurants, closing deals, making plans. She felt like she was watching life through glass. She thought of that man again, the stranger she'd helped. He'd seemed fragile yet composed, his clothes too fine for someone down on his luck. There had been a flicker of something behind his polite smile, something restrained. Was he connected to what happened? The timing had been too precise. He'd left just moments before security came for her. A few days passed in gray monotony. Then, one afternoon, a knock at her door startled her. When she opened it, a man stood there holding a sleek black envelope. "Ms. Harper?" he asked formally. "Yes." He handed it to her. "You've been invited to a private charity dinner this weekend at the Grand Windsor Hotel." Lena frowned. "There must be some mistake. I can't afford." "The invitation is fully covered. The host requested you personally." "Who's the host?" she asked, her heart suddenly uneasy. He smiled faintly. Mr. Alexander Vale. The name rang no bells. She hesitated before taking the envelope. The card inside was embossed in gold. An evening of gratitude, private attendance only. That night, she turned the invitation over in her hands again and again. Part of her wanted to throw it away. But another part, the same restless spark that had driven her to help that stranger, whispered that maybe this was a sign. When Saturday came, she borrowed a dress from Cassie, who still hadn't forgiven her but had softened after seeing Lena's hollow eyes. The grand Windsor shimmered like something from another world. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, polished silver. Guests in suits and gowns glided through the lobby like a dream she didn't belong in. She was about to turn back when a familiar voice stopped her. "You came." Lena turned and froze. It was him, the stranger from the street. Only now, he wasn't wearing a torn jacket or carrying a cane. He stood tall in a tailored black suit, confidence radiating from every line of his face. Her pulse stuttered. "You, what is this?" He smiled faintly. "I owe you an explanation." "You," she stammered. "You're the reason I was fired." His eyes flickered with regret. "Yes, but not for the reason you think." Lena's voice rose, anger breaking through her confusion. "Do you have any idea what that did to me? To my daughter? You walked into my life. I helped you, and then everything fell apart." He stepped closer, voice low, controlled. "I wasn't who you thought I was that day. I was testing something. Someone. You." Her breath hitched. "Testing?" "I'm Alexander Vale," he said quietly. "Founder of Vale Industries, the company you worked for." The world tilted. "You... what?" "I needed to see who in my organization still remembered what humanity looks like, who treats a stranger with kindness when no one's watching." Her stomach twisted. "So it was all a setup? A test?" He nodded once. "And you passed." Lena took a step back, disgust and disbelief flooding her veins. "I lost my job because of you." He looked genuinely pained. "You were never meant to be fired. There was a miscommunication. The report came through before I could intervene. I tried to correct it, but HR..." He trailed off, frustration hardening his jaw. Her voice trembled. "You ruined my life to prove a point." He looked at her for a long moment. "No, I might have just changed it." She stared at him, unable to decide whether she wanted to slap him or cry. Outside, the city lights flickered across the ballroom windows, reflecting the two of them, a billionaire in disguise and a single mother who'd lost everything for doing the right thing. But beneath the polished surface of his apology, something else stirred, a flicker of familiarity, of connection. And it scared her, because the last thing she wanted was to start feeling something for the man who'd broken her world apart. Lena didn't remember walking out of the ballroom. Her heels clicked against the marble, echoing like gunshots in the quiet corridor. The scent of champagne and polish would turn sour in her nose. She shoved through the hotel doors and stepped into the cold night air, gulping it down as if she'd been drowning. Behind her, she heard his voice. "Lena, wait." She spun, anger crackling like static. "No, you don't get to say my name like that." Alexander's expression was unreadable, calm, regretful, something softer lurking beneath. "Please, just let me explain." "Explain." Her laugh came out sharp, brittle. "You disguise yourself as some struggling stranger, let me risk my job helping you, and now you want to explain." He took a step closer, his tone quiet but steady. "I didn't expect HR to fire you. I swear to you, I tried to stop it the same day. I thought..." "You thought what?" she snapped. "That you could play God with people's lives? That firing me would be some sort of lesson in compassion?" He flinched. That, at least, gave her some satisfaction. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said finally, "but I owe you the truth." "Then start there," she said coldly, crossing her arms. "Why me?" He hesitated. "Because you stood out." She frowned. "I didn't even know you existed." "I know," he said softly. "That's what made it real. You weren't trying to impress anyone. You just saw someone in need and acted. Everyone else walked past. You didn't." She wanted to scream that decency wasn't a test, that kindness shouldn't come with consequences. But when she met his gaze, something inside her faltered. There was no arrogance there, only weariness, loneliness. Still, she forced her voice to stay hard. You said you might have changed my life. What does that even mean? Alexander reached into his pocket and handed her a folded letter. Read it, then decide whether to ever see me again. He turned and walked away, his stride heavy, deliberate. The hotel doors closed behind him with a muted thud, leaving her in the pale glow of the streetlights. Her fingers trembled as she opened the letter. Ms. Harper, following an internal review, your termination has been reversed. Effective immediately, you are reinstated to Vail Industries with full benefits, retroactive pay, and promotion to Senior Logistics Coordinator. Please report to the downtown headquarters at your convenience. Alexander Vail. The words blurred. She read them twice, 3 times. Promotion. Full pay. Headquarters. It should have been relief. But what flooded her chest wasn't relief. It was confusion, because it didn't erase what she'd lost. The humiliation. The fear in Emma's eyes when Lena couldn't pay rent. The night she cried silently so her daughter wouldn't hear. And yet, somewhere beneath the anger, there was something else. A pulse. A curiosity she didn't want to name. The next morning, she stood in front of the gleaming glass towers of Vail Industries. Her reflection looked small against the mirrored surface. She wore her best suit, pressed, simple, borrowed confidence in every seam. The receptionist smiled nervously when she saw her name on the visitor list. Mr. Vail is expecting you. Lena followed her through the corridors. Everything felt too bright, too clean. She could almost hear the hum of whispered curiosity as employees glanced her way. The woman who'd been fired, the woman who'd been reinstated, by the CEO himself. When she entered his office, Alexander was standing by the window, sleeves rolled to his elbows, staring out at the city. He toned, and for the first time, he looked uncertain. I wasn't sure you'd come. I almost didn't, she said. He nodded. That's fair. She placed the letter on his desk. Why do this? Why go to all this trouble for me? He studied her face for a long moment before answering. Because I see something in you I lost in myself years ago. The words hit harder than she expected. What do you mean? I used to believe in people, he said quietly. In decency. In giving second chances. Then I built this company and learned that kindness is the first thing to die in boardrooms. You reminded me it doesn't have to. Lena exhaled slowly. That doesn't undo what you did. No, he admitted, but maybe it can mean something more now. For a moment, silence filled the space between them, not awkward, but charged. He gestured to the seat across from him. I want you to take this role. Lena, you earned it, even if the path here was wrong. She hesitated. You could have just said sorry. His smile was faint. Some mistakes require more than words. She sat down, crossing her legs, chin lifted. And if I say no? He shrugged. Then you walk away with full compensation and a letter of recommendation strong enough to get you hired anywhere in the city. But I hope you'll stay. Why? He looked at her, something unspoken flickering in his eyes. Because I think you'd change this place. And because he stopped himself, glancing away. Because I want to make it right. Her pulse quickened despite herself. The sincerity in his tone disarmed her. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. I'll take it, but don't think this means I forgive you. I wouldn't dare, he said softly, a ghost of a smile on his lips. That night, after she tucked him into bed, Lena stood at the window again, watching the city lights shimmer like reflections of choices she didn't know how to make. Somewhere downtown, Alexander Vail was likely working late, buried under his empire. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that he'd meant what he said about wanting to change. But as the days that followed unfolded, Lena began to sense that the test hadn't really ended. Not for her, not for him, because every look, every meeting, every brief exchange between them seemed to carry something heavier than words, something dangerous, fragile, and impossible to ignore. And buried beneath it all was a secret she didn't yet see coming, one that would turn the lines between betrayal and redemption inside out. For the first few weeks back at Vale Industries, Lena walked through the office like someone wearing borrowed skin. Every smile felt forced, every whispered conversation just out of earshot made her wonder if they were talking about her, the woman who was fired, then brought back by the CEO himself. It didn't help that Alexander's office was only a few doors down from Hayes now. She tried to avoid him, to keep things strictly professional, but it was impossible. He had a way of appearing at just the right, or wrong, time. Meetings, hallway run-ins, casual morning greetings that left her pulse slightly out of rhythm. One morning, she found a small note on her desk. His handwriting, clean, angular. Lunch? Just a talk. No strings. AV. She stared at it for a long time, the edges soft between her fingertips. She should have thrown it away. She wanted to throw it away. But curiosity, or maybe something she didn't want to name, made her pause. By noon, she was standing in front of his private dining room, a glass-paneled space overlooking the river. The view was almost cruel in its beauty, the sunlight breaking over the water like shattered gold. Alexander stood by the window, sleeves rolled again, tie loosened. He looked less like a billionaire today and more like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. "You didn't have to come," he said quietly, turning toward her. "Then why ask me?" "Because I hoped you would." Lena sighed, folding her arms. "You said you wanted to talk. So talk." He gestured to the table. "Sit, please." She hesitated but finally sat down. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sounds were the clink of silverware and the soft hum of the air conditioner. Finally, he said, "You think I'm heartless, and maybe you're right. But what happened that day, it wasn't just about testing compassion. It was about finding it again." Lena frowned. "What do you mean?" He exhaled, eyes distant. "A year ago, I lost someone. Someone I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. She left. No warning, no goodbye. Said she couldn't live with the man I'd become." Lena's voice softened despite herself. "I'm sorry." He gave a sad smile. "Don't be. She was right. I built this empire but lost everything that mattered in the process. Since then, I've been trying to remember what decency feels like. Then that day, there you were. No agenda, no expectation, just kindness." She felt a pang, a mixture of empathy and resentment. "You don't get to turn me into your moral compass." He nodded slowly. "I know. I just wanted to tell you why." They ate in silence after that, the air between them dense but not hostile. When she left, he didn't try to stop her. But as she walked back to her office, she realized something terrifying. She no longer hated him. Weeks blurred into months. Working under Alexander meant constant pressure. He demanded precision, yet when she faltered, he defended her. When senior executives tried to undermine her, he quietly corrected them. When she succeeded, he made sure she got credit. Still, the rumors grew. Whispers that she was his favorite, that she had a hold over him, that something more was happening behind closed doors. It infuriated her, because it wasn't true. Not yet. But sometimes, when he looked at her a second too long, when his hand brushed hers during late meetings, when his voice softened as he said her name, she wasn't sure she could still tell where the line was. One evening, after everyone else had left, she found him still in his office. The city glowed beneath them, streaks of silver and amber reflected in the glass. "You should go home," she said, standing at the doorway. He looked up from his desk, exhaustion etched into his features. "And do what?" "Sit in silence." She hesitated, then stepped inside. Silence isn't always bad. Depends on who's in it. Something in his tone made her chest tighten. "Alexander," she began, but her voice caught. He rose, closing the distance between them until she could feel the faint warmth of his breath. "You don't have to say anything," he murmured. "I just wanted to see you." Without all of this, he gestured vaguely at the office, the city, the weight of everything. For a moment, she didn't move. The air was thick with tension, that unbearable, magnetic pull of two people who know they shouldn't cross a line but are already halfway there. Then she stepped back. "This isn't right." He nodded, jaw clenched. I know. And just like that, the spell broke. She left without looking back, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the moment, the closeness, the near confession hanging between them. And beneath the confusion and guilt was a terrifying realization. She wanted to see him again. The next day, when she arrived at work, her phone buzzed with a message. "We need to talk. Urgent. AV." She frowned. Again? But when she reached his office, Alexander wasn't alone. A woman sat across from him, tall, elegant, her posture sharp as glass. Her diamond ring caught the morning light, scattering it across the room. "Lena," Alexander said, his expression unreadable. "This is Victoria." The woman smiled, her eyes cool. Alexander's fiancée. Lena froze. The world went soundless. "Fiancé." Her throat tightened. I didn't know." Victoria tilted her head, studying her like a specimen. "No reason you should have, though I've heard your name quite a bit lately." Lena's stomach dropped. Alexander started to speak, but Victoria cut in smoothly. "My dear, you seem very close to my fiancé. Late-night work, private meetings." Her tone was hunted venom. "You must be indispensable." Lena felt her cheeks burn, but she stood tall. "Everything I've done here is professional." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Victoria, that's enough." "Is it?" she asked coolly. "Because I'd like to know how professional it was when you invited her to your private suite last month." Lena's heart stopped. "What?" He looked furious now, but not at Victoria. "You're twisting this." "Oh, darling," Victoria said, rising from her seat, voice soft but cutting. "You've always been terrible at pretending your guilt isn't written all over your face." Then she turned to Lena with a glint of triumph. "You should ask him, Miss Harper. Ask him how long he's been keeping secrets." And before Lena could speak, she was gone, the door slamming behind her like a gunshot. Alexander stood frozen, eyes shadowed, mouth tight with something like regret. Lena's voice came out barely a whisper. "Is it true?" He didn't answer, and in that silence, that heavy, hollow, soul-crushing silence, she already knew. The air in Alexander's office thickened until it felt impossible to breathe. Lena stood frozen by the door, every muscle trembling, every thought colliding in her head until it became a single echoing truth. He had someone else. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. "You're engaged." Alexander didn't meet her eyes. "It's complicated." Lena let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Complicated? That's what people say when they've been caught." "It's not what you think." "Then explain it to me," she snapped, stepping closer, fury overpowering the ache clawing at her chest. "Explain why I'm standing here like a fool finding out from her that you're promised to someone else." He raked a hand through his hair, the calm facade cracking. "Victoria and it's not real anymore. It hasn't been for a long time." "Then why the ring? The announcement? The charity events? The photograph plastered across half the city?" He hesitated, and that hesitation, that single heartbeat of silence, said more than any denial could. Lena shook her head slowly. "You could have told me. You had every chance." "I didn't want to drag you into it," he said. "There's a merger involved, politics, shareholders. The engagement, it's a performance. It's been that way for years." Her laugh came again, hollow this time. "So that's all I am to you too? Another performance?" He flinched. "No, you're the only real thing I've had in years." The words hung between them like a fragile thread. She stared at him, the man she had wanted to hate, the man who had fired her, lifted her, confused her, and now shattered what little balance she'd found. "You don't get to say that," she whispered. "You don't get to make me the exception when you've built your life on lies." "Lena!" She stepped back, the fury draining into heartbreak. "I thought," her voice broke, "I thought you were different. That everything that happened, all of this, meant something." "It does mean something," he said desperately, moving toward her, but she held up her hand, stopping him cold. "Don't." Her throat ached as she turned away. I can't do this. Not again. He frowned. Again. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her purse. My daughter's father. He lied too. Said he loved me. Said he'd always be there. Then one day, he wasn't. Just a note in an empty closet. So forgive me if I'm not interested in being anyone's secret. Alexander's expression softened, regret deepening the lines around his eyes. Lena, I'm not him. No, she said quietly, opening the door. You're worse, because you made me believe I could trust again. She walked out before he could respond. By the time she reached the street, her vision blurred. The cool air stung against her tears. She walked without knowing where she was going. Through the city's noise, the lights smearing like watercolor. When she finally stopped, she was standing on the pedestrian bridge overlooking the river, the same river she'd looked down on from his office window. Only now it seemed endless, dark, swallowing. She leaned against the railing, letting the wind dry her tears. She thought of Emma, of the bills she'd paid with her first paycheck back, of Mrs. Patel's words, "You have a kind heart. Don't change." And she thought of Alexander, the way he'd looked at her like she was something worth saving. The way that same look now made her sick. Her phone buzzed. Alexander, please, just let me explain everything. Not as your boss. Not as the man you think you know. She didn't reply. The next message came a minute later. Alexander, meet me tomorrow. Noon. The Riverside Cafe where we first spoke after your reinstatement. I'll bring proof. If you don't come, I'll understand. Lena stared at the screen until the words blurred. Proof. She wanted to ignore it, to walk away for good. But something, that stubborn, aching hope she hated, wouldn't let her. The next day, she arrived at the cafe before him. The smell of coffee and rain hung in the air. She chose a corner table, far from the windows, heart pounding with every passing second. When Alexander finally appeared, he looked different, older, as if the night had drained him. He sat across from her without saying a word and slid a brown envelope across the table. Inside were photographs, contracts, letters, documents proving what he'd said. The engagement wasn't real. It was part of a merger agreement between two conglomerates, a public illusion to stabilize shareholders after scandal years earlier. Lena flipped through the pages in silence. Every piece was legitimate. Every line of it made her more confused. I tried to end it months ago, he said quietly, but the board threatened to pull funding. If I walked away, thousands of jobs would have been on the line, including yours. She looked up at him, tears burning her eyes. Then why didn't you just tell me? I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid that if you knew the truth, you'd see me the way everyone else does, as a manipulator, not a man trying to fix the mess he made. She closed the envelope, her voice trembling. You still lied. You could have trusted me. I wanted to, he said softly. You have no idea how much. They sat in silence, the cafe humming around them, clinking cups, murmured voices, the soft patter of rain against the window. I don't know if I can believe you, she said finally. I don't blame you, he said, but I'll spend however long it takes to earn that trust back. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it. A billionaire at a Riverside Cafe, promising redemption to a single mother who'd once been fired from his company. It sounded like something out of a movie. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw no arrogance there, only exhaustion and something heartbreakingly sincere. I don't want promises, she whispered. I just want honesty. He nodded. Then that's what you'll get, from now on. Lena rose to leave, the envelope tucked under her arm. As she walked past him, he reached out, barely touching her wrist. Lena, he said softly, you once told me silence isn't always bad. You were right, but I'd rather hear your anger than your silence any day. She met his eyes, and for a heartbeat, the world stilled. Then she gently pulled her hand away. Goodbye, Alexander. As she stepped out into the rain, she realized she didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal or the fact that part of her still wanted to forgive him. But somewhere deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. Not yet, because betrayal doesn't die with distance. It lingers, waiting for truth to finish what lies began. The week that followed was quiet, unnervingly quiet. Lena tried to lose herself in work, in Emma's laughter, in the rhythm of normalcy. But silence had weight now. Every time her phone buzzed, she expected his name. Every time it didn't, a strange emptiness crept in. She'd returned to the office 2 days after that meeting. Alexander wasn't there. His assistant claimed he was traveling for a board conference. The staff moved through the corridors with their usual precision, their heels clicking against the marble floors like a metronome to her anxiety. She avoided his office entirely. Still, every time she passed the hallway leading there, she caught herself glancing toward the glass door, half expecting it to open, half hoping it wouldn't. One evening, as she gathered her things, a voice stopped her. Ms. Rivera. It was Victor, one of the senior analysts, sharp, polite, and perpetually curious. He leaned against the desk, eyes flicking toward the envelope tucked in her bag. Word around the office is the boss isn't too happy these days, he said. Something about a deal going sideways. Lena forced a polite smile. I wouldn't know. He studied her for a moment. You should be careful. You know, when men like him break, they don't break quietly. She frowned. What are you implying? He shrugged, straightening. Only that Alexander Ward doesn't lose control without a reason. And lately, he's been looking at you like you're that reason. The words lingered long after he walked away. That night, Lena found herself standing outside her apartment balcony, staring at the skyline. The city glowed, indifferent, beautiful, distant. Emma was asleep in her room, her soft snores carrying faintly through the cracked door. Lena's mind drifted back to the envelope. She'd read through it twice, searching for a lie, a loophole, something that would make the pain simpler, cleaner. But everything had checked out. Alexander hadn't been lying about the engagement's purpose. Yet knowing the truth didn't make forgiveness easier. It was betrayal all the same, not of faithfulness, but of trust. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. He's not what you think. Lena's chest tightened. Who is this? She typed. No response. A minute later, another message arrived. This time, a photo. It showed Alexander in a dimly lit restaurant, seated across from a woman Lena didn't recognize. She was laughing, touching his hand. His expression was unreadable, not affectionate, but engaged, like a man deep in conversation he couldn't walk away from. Her stomach turned. The timestamp was from an hour ago. She wanted to delete the photo, to pretend it didn't exist. But curiosity, and something darker, pushed her to save it. Then the phone rang. Lena. His voice, low, familiar, tense. She froze. Alexander. I didn't want to call this late, but you need to know something. Someone's been feeding the press stories about us. Fabrications. They are trying to make it look like I've been. Cheating, she cut in, bitterly. He exhaled, frustrated. It's not what it looks like. The woman in that photo, she's from the board of investors. I was warning her about a leak inside our communications department. I swear. How do you know what photo I'm talking about? She demanded. A pause. Then softly, because I know how fast this company bleeds rumors. Lena gripped the phone tighter. Then tell me why someone would send it to me. I don't know, he said. But whoever it is, they are trying to hurt both of us. Silence stretched between them, fragile and heavy. Finally, she said, you shouldn't have called me. I couldn't not, he replied. Not when I know you're out there thinking the worst of me again. Her heart ached at the quiet desperation in his tone. I'm tired, Alexander, she said finally. Tired of trying to figure out where truth ends and lies begin. I know, he whispered. But if you walk away now, they win. Who's they? She asked, but he'd already hung up. The line went dead. Lena stared at the dark screen for a long moment before tossing the phone onto the couch. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand the universe stop testing her. Instead, she curled up beside Emma's door, listening to her daughter's soft breathing, and whispered, I'll protect us this time. No more broken promises. But promises have a way of bending fate. The next morning, when Lena arrived at work, the building was swarming with reporters. Flashbulbs went off as she tried to push through the crowd. Questions flew around her. Ms. Rivera, are you aware of your involvement in Mr. Ward's resignation scandal? Did your relationship with the CEO compromise company policies? Is it true you were reinstated after a personal favor? Her breath hitched. What? Inside the lobby, security ushered her into a side corridor. The HR director, pale and sweating, rushed toward her. Lena, I'm so sorry. Someone leaked internal files. Private messages. Photos. The board's furious. Her knees nearly gave out. What files? Before he could answer, Alexander's voice echoed down the hall. Enough. He strode in, sharp suit slightly wrinkled, eyes blazing. The crowd of employees parted like water. He stopped in front of her, and for a fleeting moment, the world narrowed to just them. You didn't do this, he said, firm, defiant, and I'll make damn sure everyone knows it. Alexander, the board, the HR director began. He cut him off. The board will wait. Then to Lena, softer, come with me. He led her to his office, now half-packed, boxes along the wall. They forced me to resign this morning, he said. They think my relationship with you was a conflict of interest. Lena stared at him in disbelief. Relationship? His jaw clenched. I told them the truth, that you were innocent, that everything between us was real. Her voice cracked. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, he said, stepping closer. Because for once in my life, I wanted to choose honesty over image. Tears filled her eyes. And now you've lost everything. He smiled faintly. Maybe not everything. Outside the office, chaos still hummed, reporters shouting, staff whispering. But in that small room, time seemed to pause. For a moment, Lena saw the man beneath the title, tired, flawed, human. And in spite of everything, her heart broke all over again. Alexander, she whispered, what happens now? He exhaled slowly, eyes meeting hers with quiet resolve. Now, I tell the world the truth. And with that, he reached for the intercom, voice steady as he announced, This is Alexander Ward. Effective immediately, I resign as CEO of Ward Enterprises. I take full responsibility for recent events. The woman involved, Ms. Lena Rivera, bears no fault. She is not my scandal. She is my redemption. Gasps echoed from the hallway. Lena's breath caught. He looked at her, no regret, only peace. Let them write what they want. But this time, the story will be mine. Her heart trembled, because for the first time, his words weren't a performance. They were a confession. The press storm lasted days. Cameras followed Lena from her building to the grocery store, hurling questions she refused to answer. Headlines bloomed across every news site. Billionaire CEO resigns over scandal with single mom employee. They painted her as a homewrecker, a manipulator, a woman who traded compassion for ambition. Lena deleted her social media. She stopped answering calls. Even Emma's school started whispering, parent avoiding eye contact at pickup time. But through it all, one thing became clear. Alexander Ward had disappeared. He'd given his resignation, faced the press once, and then vanished like a ghost. No statements, no follow-up interviews, no defense. Just silence. Weeks passed. The noise faded. The company appointed a new CEO. The world moved on. Lena tried to do the same. She found work again, a small startup that didn't care about her past. The hours were long, the pay modest, but she was free. She poured everything into Emma, into rebuilding the simple life she once thought was gone forever. Still, every night when she tucked her daughter in, she thought of him, not as a billionaire boss or the man in disguise, but as a stranger she'd helped in the rain months ago, who'd smiled with quiet gratitude in eyes that carried more sadness than wealth could hide. One evening, as she was locking up her office, a familiar voice broke the stillness. I was hoping you'd still be here. She froze. When she turned, he stood by the glass door. No suit, no entourage, just a simple gray coat, collar turned up against the drizzle. Alexander. His name came out like a whisper she'd been holding for weeks. He looked thinner, wearier, but his eyes, those were the same. Steady, warm, searching. You shouldn't be here, she said, heart hammering. If anyone sees you, let them, he murmured, stepping closer. I've spent months hiding from my own decisions. I'm done running. Lena swallowed hard. Why are you here? He hesitated, then held out a letter. To give you this. She took it cautiously. The paper was thick, the handwriting unmistakably his. Inside was a single line. I lost my title, but I found my truth, and it began the day you refused to walk past me. Her throat tightened. Alexander. I built an empire, he said softly, but I never built anything real. Not until you. You taught me what decency looks like when no one's watching. And I ruined that by making you collateral in my war with myself. She blinked back tears. You didn't ruin it. You just made it harder to believe. He nodded, guilt flickering in his expression. I can't change what happened, but I can choose who I am from here on out. I'm starting something new, a foundation, for working mothers who've been unfairly fired or blacklisted. I'd like you to run it. Her eyes widened. Me? You're the only person I trust to do it right, he said simply. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain tapped softly against the window, filling the silence between heartbeats. Finally, Lena said, Why me, Alexander? After everything. He smiled faintly, because despite everything, you still helped people, even when no one was watching, even when you had every reason not to. She looked down at the letter again, the words trembling in her hand. I can't promise anything, she said quietly. I'm not sure I'm ready to forgive you. He nodded. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to do something good with what's left of my life. The sincerity in his tone broke something in her, that stubborn wall she'd built to keep from feeling too much. She sighed, folding the letter carefully. All right, I'll think about it. He smiled, a small, weary curve of relief. That's all I needed to hear. They stood in silence for a while, the hum of the city faint through the glass. Then Lena spoke, her voice low. You know, Emma still talks about the man who helped fix her umbrella that day at the diner. He looked down, almost smiling. Does she? She said he looked like someone who'd lost something important, but didn't want anyone to know. Alexander's voice broke slightly. She was right. Lena took a deep breath. So, what now? He looked at her, rain catching in his lashes like fragments of glass. Now, I go rebuild the right way. And maybe, someday, when you don't flinch at the sound of my name, I'll come back and see if there's something still worth saving. Her heart ached, with grief, with relief, with something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. She nodded. Maybe. He gave a small, respectful bow, a gesture that carried gratitude more than farewell, and turned to leave. As he stepped into the rain, Lena pressed her hand against the glass, watching him disappear into the gray haze. For the first time, she didn't feel broken. She felt whole, not because he'd returned, but because she'd learned she didn't need him to. She turned off the office lights, gathered her things, and walked out into the drizzle. The air was cold, sharp, alive, and somewhere deep inside, beneath the ache and memory, something new was beginning. Quiet, patient, unafraid. Because sometimes betrayal isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of the truth.